Well, welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend here from March Classic with Grain Farmers of Ontario. A big thank you for hosting us this week for this in-person event. We have Al Mussell, we have Bailey Elchinger, as well as Secretary Sonny Perdue joining us for this discussion today. Al, I want to start with you. We had a conclusion to the rail strike, it seems, only 2 days that we saw workers not on strike. But there were a lot of concerns about what impact it would have on already short fertilizer supplies. Where do we set here as we head into the spring planting season? Is there enough fertilizer on hand at this point?
Yeah, Tyne, we don't have any firm statistics with respect to Eastern Canada on urea, which is a big concern. What I've heard is 2/3 to 80% of the urea could be in place. But even if we're short 20% of a big number is a big number, so that's a concern. Going back to the rail strike, this was a big concern for agriculture with respect to obviously southbound potash into the U.S., but then also in the West where we're so short grain to feed livestock from a bad crop last year. There's a lot of corn movement from Nebraska, let's say, up into the West, and that was under risk.
Well, speaking of short, not seeing as many winter wheat here as I expected, Bailey. And you get to the U.S., I know Eastern Corn Belt, we had some additional acres that came there. Western Wheat Belt area really struggling there, but there was a problem in Michigan getting this wheat crop planted. Are you concerned about wheat supplies as we head into kind of these harvest months?
Yeah, so the USDA actually had Ohio wheat acres higher than a year ago. I think we'll continue to see that number fluctuate going forward in that northwest corner of the state. There were some challenges with the wet fall, similar to here in Ontario as well as Michigan. So I think we could see some interesting basis fluctuations this summer because of that lack of planted acres in mainly that Michigan, Northern Ohio, Southwest Ontario.
Now, Secretary Perdue, I know you have experience on the feed grain side of it as well as the elevator side of it. And Bailey spoke about basis. There's a lot of comparisons to 08, 09 right now. But I know that you see a big difference as well.
Well, there are differences. Obviously, similarities are future prices. But in 08, 09, I was in the grain elevator business in the Georgia and the Carolinas, and we saw cash prices lead futures up. This year is just the reverse, is that futures are here and basis is below, which gives much more problems to the farmer producer and to elevators than it did previously.
Well, speaking of the problems, you look at basis, how much of impact is logistics having on the basis that we're seeing from Ontario down to the Eastern Corn Belt where you are, Michigan, Ohio, areas like that, Bailey?
Certainly watching barge freight and rail freight and how that impacts our ability to get that product to the export. We continue to talk about export capabilities and the potential for more export business coming to the U.S., but we still got to get it there. And we're still struggling with that across Canada and across the U.S.
Well, we're also still coming to terms with what the impact of the crisis in Ukraine is going to have on the overall trade picture right now. Our hearts, our thoughts go out to everyone in Ukraine right now. I can't imagine what it would be like thinking about putting a crop in as you're dealing with all of these issues. But you look at the realignment of world trade. What impact is it going to have possibly on Canadian producers, Al?
Well, Canada is an export-oriented country, so the potential ramifications longer term could be quite profound. There's been a lot reported about wheat and the Black Sea as a source of wheat into particularly Middle Eastern, North African countries where a lot of the diet of calories comes from wheat flour. So that's an immediate food security issue. A second realignment has to do with corn, and the Ukraine is a very large corn exporter. In fact, I looked at, you go back to 2020, Ukraine was more than half the U.S. in terms of a corn exporter. Well, a lot of those corn exports were going in to feed livestock production in Europe. So you look at Spain as a major pork exporter. Well, we know where the feed was coming from now. It was coming from Ukraine. I understand that Spain and Italy now have emergency programs to assist the livestock sector. And we also worry now about chicken production in the Netherlands, also dependent on those feed grains. So that, I think we know, or we should know, that you can't take grain to livestock, you take livestock to grain, but This is what they've been doing in Europe.
Secretary Perdue?
Yeah, Ty, and I think this geopolitical uncertainty just adds one more major uncertainty to agriculture that had enough risk as it was. Will we go back to our market rules-based, market-oriented trading worldwide as we had done since the post-Soviet era, or are we going to go back to more of allies and alliances there? And I'll mention that as well. And I think we're fortunate here in North America to have the relationships that we have through our agreements with Mexico, U.S., and Canada.
Yeah, very good point. All right, well, right now, typically, I mean, next week, you're talking about a big acreage report coming out of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We're really not talking about it much because of all the other issues at play. But we will get kind of a taste of where you all think acreage could fall. We'll do that, but first we need to take a quick break right here on U.S. Farm Report.